for tuning into Act 3 this week. On the Zoom conversation with me today is Claire Deneen. She's with Bitchin Chickens, and we're now going to talk with her once again. Welcome back to the program. Thank you so much, Claire. I am really happy that you're here. And I also told people a minute ago that, how'd you get the name Bitchin Chickens? Because I really think it's fantastic. What inspired you to get that name?
I'm kind of a little bit of a grammar queen. I'm always interested in language. I actually took Latin for 2 years in high school. So I kind of like bitchin means excellent, but it also means complaining. And so I think that sometimes people, there's some city regulations about roosters because people think roosters are loud. My hens make far more noise than my roosters ever have. And, they talk a lot. They have opinions. And so it's that combination of kind of, talking and how great chickens are.
Well, I love the name, and I think you're absolutely right. I remember when I would get the schoolyard roosters. I'd get the schoolyard eggs that had hatched, and of course, it takes a little bit of time to determine whether it's going to be a rooster or it's going to be a chicken, especially if you're a novice, but even more so, it takes a while to figure it out. And I remember one year we had 7 roosters and only the remaining ones were hens. And I just remember thinking, well, what am I going to do? You can only have one rooster because otherwise they'll try to kill each other. I remember having them grow, of course, and you can speak to this much better than I can, but when you do bring new birds to the flock, you need to bring them in slowly. You need to, you have to be really careful on how you do that because you can make your birds unwell. But I was like, what am I going to do with these? What am I going to do with these roosters? Because they were so loud, especially when they became teenage roosters. Unfortunately, in my family, we ended up selling the birds to a local butcher, and he would use and sell them or do whatever it was that he did with them. I couldn't kill the bird unless the bird was sick. If the bird was sick, I was the person responsible for making sure that that bird didn't suffer. But when they're, alive and teenagers, I couldn't just wring their necks as much as at times I wanted to. Why can't you have these birds? Like, why are they so fussy with each other? Why can't roosters hang out like the way hens do?
Well, I think that there's lots of animals that males are part of a group, a herd, or a flock, and then the young ones go off and hang out as teenagers. And you can have what's called a bachelor flock. So they will live and coexist quite well, but they have to be out of earshot and being able to see hens. But if you just kept them on your own, and some people do, they love their roosters. Roosters tend to be the friendliest of chicks. They're quite loving. The competition comes around resources, for sure. When you think about big hatcheries and when they hatch chicks, what happens to all those day-old roost, like the cockerels, baby roosters?
Yeah.
Do you know what happens to them?
No.
They grind them up. They put them in a little machine and they grind them up and they kill them right at hatch because the hens go off to either become layers or meat birds, and that's what happens. And so for all of us small flock people who hatch, statistically, you're going to get 50% roosters, 50% hens. Every once in a while, I'm lucky and I get more hens than roosters. But I always say to people, if you're going to hatch, what are you going to do with those roosters? And sometimes you can have 1 or 2 roosters, especially if you've got lots of hens and you've got lots of space and they do coexist. But the term pecking order, really, chickens peck the ground, they peck their environment, but they peck each other, right? And they peck always to reinforce that hierarchy. And so when you bring in new birds or when you have competition over resources, meaning hens, there will be more pecking, right? And so I have one rooster and they do tend to talk more. So like when I've had one dog, it's been a lot quieter than when I've had two.
Always.
Right?
Yeah,
So
always.
somebody
My
barks
two
at the
girls were
door,
way
the other
louder
one
than
has to join in, and it's the
totally.
same with roosters. So, you know,
Yeah.
it's about thinking about that in advance. You know, some people are
So,
prepared to eat their birds, and that's okay, but you do
and
have to think about where to rehome them.
so that's what I was going to ask you. Do you use your birds as part of your diet as well? Do you eat your birds or
I
no?
don't, but I have friends who are perfectly happy to take them and eat them, and I donate them to those folks.
Yeah.
And you know, one of the things, I started my Facebook page because I thought it would be a good place for me to be selling hatching eggs, but also to find homes for roosters, because my roosters have gone to, you know, Port Alberni and Machosen and Salt Spring Island and Quadra Island, because I was able to advertise and people would pass through. I live on Gabriola, but I work in Nanaimo, and people would pass by, or I travel with my job and I could take a rooster someplace.
Yeah.
Facebook now has banned all animal sales and rehoming posts, including free things. And you can get shut down if you try to do that. And so
Oh
the
my God, I did
opportunity,
no idea.
yeah, they don't
Oh,
enforce it uniformly, but once you've been flagged, you're repeatedly flagged, and they will shut your account down. And
mm,
so
so
I
sad.
now used Nanaimo or Kijiji, but I do try to find homes for roosters where people are not going to eat them and they need a replacement for the one that they've had, or you know, they've never had a rooster. And roosters are actually a really integral part of a flock. They're not just pretty, but they manage conflicts, they bring food, they fight off predators.
Yeah.
So, you know,
Yeah, I had one rooster for a while. And we didn't have the capacity. I had a growing son and he just was, becoming a teenager and it just was
mhm,
not working. And I was working, and my husband was as well. So it was a little bit, we just couldn't do the full end. We could do the
mhm,
chickens, but there's a little bit more maintenance that goes with a rooster.
mhm,
Um, I was the same as you. I would prefer the birds would have gone to
mhm,
somewhere, but at least I know they weren't wasted, right?
for sure.
They didn't die an untimely death. I mean, I am surprised about the rules regarding, posting that. I would think that that would be a wonderful way for us to be able to share healthy animals and make sure that
Mhm,
they're given safe homes. So speaking of that part of it for your purposes, and your raising of your birds, um, uh, how big is your flock? How big is too big for a city? Like, there are rules about our city. I know
mhm.
that I think in Nanaimo we're allowed to have two birds. I think maybe four. I'm not sure.
I think it's probably at least four. Yeah, most municipalities will allow you to have three or six or whatever, but no roosters because of the crowing. And, you
Yeah.
know, there are roosters that crow a lot.
Mm,
I've been super lucky that I don't have loud roosters. I live on an island and I live with acreage. Currently, I have about 24 hens and a rooster.
mm,
Occasionally, it creeps up there, especially when you hatch chicks.
yeah,
And I I want to see how they grow out, but I also want to see what color egg they lay.
of
And I don't always
course.
know until they start laying, and they might not lay till they're 6, 7, 8 months old. And so I end up keeping a few and then I downsize some. Um, you know, there is something called chicken math. So people get 4 or 6 and they're quite happy with that, but then they want a different color bird, or they want a different color egg, or their neighbors are downsizing a few. Could they take those? And, you know, on Facebook groups, there's a lot of jokes about chicken math because, you know, people get more and more. But it is hoarding in a little way, because I think what happens is, imagine that you live in a house with 4 roommates, and then somebody decides to move in a whole bunch of other ones without telling you and without consulting you. And people think, well, chickens can't count and they don't know these things. Chickens, you know, up to about 30 is a good size. And then after that, it's like, it creates more stress because every time somebody comes into or out of the flock, there's stress.
Yeah,
They have to reestablish a pecking order over again. And one of
absolutely.
the things that triggers disease is stress.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
think about what your chickens want, not just what you want, right? So I've
Well,
really tried to have a handle on, and when I had 4 or 6, the cleaning requirements are less, right? Especially in the winter when they're in the coop many more hours and they've got dirty feet and they're pooping in the coop instead of outside. And, so you have to think about that stuff. And also in terms of illness, what we talked about earlier, it's hard to spot that one chicken that might be ill in a flock because there's so many of them that
yeah,
you don't notice.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you from a stress perspective, but I
Mhm.
also we had to muck out quite a bit. And you
Mhm.
really, I mean, the smell for chickens for people that are not, if they well, 4 or 6 chickens, you don't notice it so much. But when you start getting 30 chickens,
Mhm.
the mucking out processes, and you want to keep disease down as far as you can. And just the overall health and the vermin that go with that as well.
Mhm.
I know the one thing I hated about having my birds, I loved my birds more than life itself, but I'm reminded always, Nanaimo, I had my birds on Maple Ridge. Nanaimo is known for rats. I had rats
Mhm.
in Maple Ridge. The feed brought them.
Mhm.
You got to be careful that that is not an overpopulation of those types of vermin as
Mhm.
well. So it's a
Mhm.
lot more than just having a couple of chickens in the yard and saying,
Mhm.
these guys are really cute and I'm going to have an egg,
Mhm.
through and through.
Well, and
However,
think about too, if you have 20 or 30 chickens and you want to go away. So having a chicken sitter is a little different than having a dog sitter because most people don't know about chickens. And so you come home and there's a chicken that's been sick that nobody noticed, or, oh, they're sitting on eggs that now have been incubated for 5 days and you didn't want any chicks. So that becomes more of a tie too. I do have an automatic door on my coop. And
oh,
so
good.
it's battery operated, but it's a solar sensor and you can tweak it. So essentially it opens when it's light in the morning and then it closes after they go to bed. And
And
it's a
chickens are
fantastic
smart.
investment, yes, but I still go out just to check, just in case. But it is something that is useful, but you still have to be putting down fresh food and water. You
Always.
can't just go away for days without somebody looking in on your chickens.
Absolutely. But chickens are very, very smart. They know to go surprisingly smart,
Mhm.
actually. They know when it's time to get up and go out. They know when it's time to go to bed. As soon as the dusk starts to come, they're
Mhm.
heading towards their coop. They're really, really great that way. However, like you said, you need to have some kind of an automatic door or something because
Mhm.
you have an open door and you have birds,
Mhm.
you're attracting as well, those night creatures, the raccoons and the monks or the minks and
Well,
the
that's right.
and
You can't stay downtown after work and go out to dinner and a movie and get home at 11 o'clock and the raccoon has come in,
yeah,
so there is that.
yeah.
Um,
And I've had more than one bloodbath in my day. And let me just
mhm.
say, not a pretty picture to come home to. It's devastating for everyone. So, if you're
Mhm.
thinking about having chickens, do your research, pay attention, make sure that check out your blog. Speaking of which, this is a great segue to getting people to figure out how do they reach you? How do they learn more? How do people find you?
Okay, on Facebook, I'm Bitchin Chickens Farm. Same on Instagram. And so I post there daily. I just started a YouTube channel and it's capital B Bitchin dot capital C chickens. And my blog is www.bitchinchickens, all one word, all lowercase.com. So my blog, so originally, as I said, I started the Facebook page thinking I would just post ads for my hatching eggs or chicks and things. And then I started, actually, where Bitchin' Chickens started? My egg customers would ask me questions. So I started a little thing that I took an 8.5 by 11-inch fluorescent paper, cut it lengthwise, and typed out something interesting. And I called it Bitchin' Chickens News. And so I would say, hey, do you ever wonder why you've got blue eggs? And I would talk about egg genetics, or I would talk about the seasons and what was going on. And so my egg customers would be, oh, this is really interesting. So then I started posting things to educate just, other folks. And so my WordPress blog is the home to about 700 articles. I sort of just got
Wow.
into, I know, I spend a lot of time, but I've
Good for
worked a
you,
lot
though.
with,
I think it's fantastic. I love
yeah,
it.
so I've done a lot
Hmm.
about chicken health issues. I've partnered with other chicken keepers around chicken coop design. So I found people who've done really interesting coops and featured their builds. I started a series called When When Art Meets Chickens. So I featured writers, crafters, artists about their work. So it could be a poet, it could be a painter or a potter. I've done those kind of, and I've met people all over the world because sometimes these people live in the Netherlands or in Vietnam, and I'm posting their work. Another series is having chickens is a great way to meet your neighbors. I've done about 49 profiles of people who keep chickens, and it's a combination
Love it. Wow.
about how did they come to Gabriola. Most of them are Gabriola, a few of them are from Nanaimo, but how did they come here? Tell me something about yourself and tell me something about your chickens. And so there's those kind of things, but I've also partnered with, so you said you lived in the Lower Mainland.
Mhm.
That's the home of where all the big chicken farms in this province are. It's also the home of the Ministry of Agriculture's Animal Health Center. And that's where they do a lot of testing and necropsies. So it could be around avian flu, but if you had a cow or a chicken that died, you would send it for necropsy. And I went to a workshop several years ago with one of the vets who'd been there she's been there now more than 3 decades. So she is a DVM, a doctor of veterinary medicine. She has a master's degree in avian pathology. She's board certified in the United States as well as Canada. And she happens to have a part-time house here. And so we connected, and every few months we get together and I show her all these cool cases that I found on the internet or people have sent me. And we sit down and we try to talk about what's going on. Let's look at these x-rays or let's look at the necropsy pictures and let's talk about all the weird and wacky things that happen to chickens, and I write them up as case studies. And so I think we've just bypassed about 300
Wow.
of those. Yeah, so
That's
people
so
send me all kinds
impressive.
of stuff. Yeah, and people send me, my chicken had space surgery. And I'll say, great, can you send me the x-rays? And can I talk to your vet and ask them how they did the surgery? And the vet will actually send me, this is the surgery. I connected with a woman in the States who works at a a veterinary hospital. And her chicken had a heart issue and had heart surgery. First
Oh,
one in the
wow.
world, and
Oh my
they talked
gosh.
about it at some conferences in the States, but I got the actual footage from the heart surgery and pictures of the OR when all of this was going on. And so I'm always trying to challenge myself to find more and more interesting things. And I have a lot of non-chicken owners who follow my blog because they're just really interested in chickens.
Well, you know what? I'm going to be your new biggest fan because
Great.
I personally think that this, I adore the birds, but I find uniquely fantastic the people like yourself that take such good care of these beautiful, beautiful creatures that we have wandering around. Birdies are, I mean, I just love them, and I miss my birds probably more than, I mean, I've thought many times about bringing birds back into my life, right? Not quite there yet, but definitely when I'm ready, I'll be checking you out.
Okay, you can check my eggs.
I'm going to be checking your eggs and checking you out completely. Thank you so much for being on the program. Before you go, we've just got a couple of minutes left, and we're almost at the end of our program, which blows my mind. It's gone so quickly. Um, if you could imbibe in our community a great teaching, actually, quickly before I get there, just do you have one bird that's your favorite? Like, is there
Yeah, I think
one?
Sky. I have what are called frizzles. And it is a gene. It's not a breed. It's a gene that creates curled feathers.
Oh,
So
so that's the breed. But what's her
so
name?
she looks like a big feather duster, not like a silky, but curled feathers. And she has a very big crest. And so
Oh,
it's this funky, yeah. And
is it
she's
who?
really friendly. She's
What's her name?
underfoot all the Sky.
Sky. That is her name, is Sky. Oh,
Yeah.
good. All right. Well, for Sky, for all of the chicken lovers out there, including myself, if you were to leave us with, a real nugget of wisdom for people that are interested in chickens or breeding them or seeing them or being part of that whole life, what would be your teaching for this moment?
Chickens make a great pet, but do your research. They're not for everyone. And so
Yeah.
just make sure that you are able to manage the responsibility of time and space and commitment and connect yourself with a good community so that you're supported when you do experience those bumps in the road, because you will.
You will. And those bumps, it's important that you get the advice from people
Mhm.
who know what they're doing. Thank you so much, Claire Deneen from Bitchin Chickens. It's been a pleasure to talk with you for this last hour. I look forward to sharing more of your information on our YouTube platform, on iHeartRadio, and on Spotify, as well as right here on CHLY 101.7 FM. Hope you had a great day, everybody. Thanks again, Claire. Enjoy. We'll talk to you next week. See you next time on Act 3.